Week 13 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 20 quarterbacks. I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. And Josh Allen coming off the bye week. It's been a great season for Josh Allen, this Bill team. His turnovers are down. And this week it's a beatable matchup. I know San Francisco prior years, their defense was good, but this season they've had problems. Joey Bosa, we'll see if he plays in this game. Even if he does, I don't think he's 100%. And now with Amari Cooper possibly healthy and back in this game as well, I think it opens things up just a little bit more for Allen. And he's been a top quarterback all season long. Number 2, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. This week, a potential high-scoring game at the Baltimore Ravens. Jalen Hurts, ever since A.J. Brown returned to the lineup, his numbers have gone way up over the last month and a half of the season. Second, third quarterback off the board at most fantasy leagues. And this week at Baltimore, like I said, I believe both teams are going to go up and down the field. This whole offense has opened up this season as well with Saquon Barkley in the backfield, and everyone's getting a piece of it and putting up fantasy points. Number 3, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. So Lamar, another great season, an MVP caliber season for him, no doubt about it. And this week, a pretty tough matchup versus Philadelphia, where their defense has really kicked it into gear over the last month of the season. But Lamar, he could do it all. He could run the football. He could stretch it down the field. And he's been a matchup-proof type of quarterback week in and week out for many seasons now, is Lamar Jackson. So this week, even with a tough matchup, I believe Baltimore is going to put points on the board, and Lamar will be the catalyst of that. Number 4, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. What a season it's been for Joe Burrow. He's been throwing the football all over the yard, and especially in the games this season where both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins has played, he's really putting up some numbers as Joe Burrow. So this season, it seems like weekly 3+ touchdowns he's putting on the board, even though this team is going nowhere this season because their defense can't stop anyone. And this week in a division matchup versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is definitely a tough matchup, but coming off a bye and the type of season Joe Burrow's having, I think he goes out there and has a big game versus the Steelers, and he's another matchup-proof quarterback. Number 5, Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. Last week, a monster performance for him, and he almost led the fourth quarter heroics for the victory. But obviously, Austin Seibert cost him that ball game, missing the extra point that would have most likely sent it to overtime. But Jaden Daniels, he looked healthier than he has in previous weeks. He ran the football well, 7 rush attempts, 74 yards, and he has a cannon arm, and he was making plays. So after a bad loss last week, this week a good matchup on paper with the Tennessee Titans coming into Washington. I think Jaden Daniels goes out there once again and has a good game. And like I said, the key is he's running again, where that rib injury held him down from running for about 3-4 weeks. Number 6, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. This week is a great matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. Can't stop anyone, and Mahomes is starting to get things going. And now Noah Gray's emerged as a top option in this offense. 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. They're running a lot of 2 tight end sets to supplement, obviously, the injuries to Rashee Rice, who's been out for a while and out for the season, and Hollywood Brown, who's been out the whole season, and DeAndre Hopkins, who's been a decent fill-in as well for those guys. So right now, this offense is figuring things out, moving the football down the field. And now with Pacheco returning as well, I think it opens things up a little bit more. And this week in a great matchup, I think Mahomes has one of his better games of the season. Number 7, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. Last week was a down game for Jordan Love. It was the Josh Jacobs show, 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards on the ground. And this week, I believe, is going to be a high-scoring game on Thanksgiving night with the Dolphins coming into Lambeau Fields. Jordan Love, we know he's a great quarterback, spreads that football out. He's got a big arm, and he's a gunslinger at times as well. But more times than not, he makes the big plays, and he's putting up fantasy points for the most part weekly. So this week versus the Dolphins, I think he goes out there as Jordan Love, and he has another solid performance and a bounce-back performance after last week. The passing game took a back seat to the running game. Number 8, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So with now Mike Evans back in the lineup, I think this offense could get back to where it almost was. Obviously, with Chris Godwin out for the season, it's not going to be at its top form where it was early in the season. But this week, a great matchup at the Carolina Panthers. They're giving up anywhere from mid-20s, high 30s all season long. And this week, I think with Evans back, like I said, Cade Otton's been solid all season long at tight end, and 2 good running backs in Rachaad White and Bucky Irvin out of the backfield. I think Baker Mayfield goes out there, has another solid performance. Number 9, Tua of the Miami Dolphins. The last couple weeks here, Tua's really kicked it into gear, and I think he's got his legs under him. He's got his confidence back as Tua, and he's really spreading that football out. And now Jonnu Smith emerging as one of the better tight ends in the league this season over the last few weeks. So this week in a potential high-scoring game and a middle-of-the-pack defense at the Green Bay Packers, where this Dolphin team pretty much every week's a playoff game, where they're right there on the brink now trying to get in for one of those wild card spots. I think Tua could go out there once again, even in a cold environment, and produce a nice fantasy day with good weapons in Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Jonnu Smith. So those are 4 good weapons on this offense. And like I said, his confidence is back and his legs are under him. Number 10, Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, his confidence is way up there as well in his rookie season. He's making plays. Him and Courtland Sutton are really locked in, and they're going up and down the field right now as this Denver Bronco team over the last few weeks, with 64 points in the last 2 games. So this week with a good matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, where their defense has struggled surprisingly all season long, where last season they were one of the best defenses in the league. I think Bo Nix goes out there once again, has a nice performance. Number 11, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. So there's some good weeks for Goff, and some weeks he don't do much. Like last week he did throw for 269 yards, but no touchdowns, where it was the running backs and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery having solid games. But this week, Thanksgiving, I think he gets on the board once again, finding the end zone. And when you got weapons like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, and Gibbs out of the backfield, who's a good receiving back, you're going to work your way into points. So this week versus the defense of the Bears, who mightily struggled over the last month of the season, I think he bounces back this week as Goff, and he has a solid performance. Number 12, Justin Herbert of the Los Angeles Chargers. So last week was the middle of the pack type of performance for Justin Herbert. This week on the road, where he's been a better home quarterback throughout his career than he is on the road. But this week I know it's a decent matchup with the Falcons, where their defense has been middle of the pack to poor, and it's a fast track indoor game, which is always a plus. But like I said, the weapons on this offense aren't all that great, and we don't know if J.K. Dobbins is going to play. If Dobbins is out in this game, obviously that's going to be a major hit, I believe, for this offense, and things could tighten up a little bit in the passing game then on the wide receivers. But Ladd McConkey's definitely emerged over the last few weeks. He's the true number 1 for this offense. Now they really got to find that number 2 guy, where Quentin Johnston's been inconsistent, dropping passes, and Joshua Palmer's been okay, but not consistent as well. 13, Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, it's been an up and down year for him. Obviously, this Cardinal team has been playing great football, and I think last week coming off the bye, they were too loose. They were too confident, I think, going into that game in Seattle. And this week, it's a tough matchup at a good defense. No doubt about it at the Minnesota Vikings. But I think Kyler Murray's going to find a way to right the ship there. He didn't do much in last week's ball game. And when you got weapons like Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., and James Conner, there's weeks you're going to put up good ball games. And I believe this week he could be a solid performer. 14, C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans. His numbers haven't been great this season. I know they've had a lot of injuries. Nico Collins missed 4 games this season. Stephon Diggs, now he's been out for multiple weeks, and obviously he's out for the season with the torn ACL. And I know on paper this is a great matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars, but the thing with CJ Stroud, he's not scoring a lot of touchdowns this season. Obviously, he's not a runner of the football as well. And Joe Mixon's had a lot of production, where this week I definitely could see them get off to an early start, and Joe Mixon just takes over in the second half of the game, and the numbers aren't up there for Stroud. So this week, like I said, I think he could have a good game, but from what we've seen pretty much the majority of the season, I think anywhere 15-20 fantasy point range is where the numbers will land. Number 15, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. It's been a decent year for Brock Purdy, but now he's been banged up with the shoulder injury in his throwing arm. Last week he didn't play. Obviously, this week a tougher matchup on Sunday night at the Buffalo Bills if he returns. And Deebo Samuel, he hasn't been great this season as well. But George Kittle, obviously Christian McCaffrey, Juwan Jennings, they've been solid options for the San Francisco 49er team. But like I said, in this ball game at the Buffalo Bills, I don't think the ceiling is that high for Brock Purdy. And even if he does play, he's not going to be 100%. 16, Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings. So Sam Darnold, he's been great over the last month of the season, even with Justin Jefferson not putting up numbers. But now Darnold, he's not just locking in and zeroing on Jefferson. With TJ Hawkinson back, it's opened up this offense to another level. I know he's a little low on the list this week, but sometimes the upside just isn't there as these other quarterbacks. And with a full slate, obviously, some of these quarterbacks are going to take a back seat and be down in the rankings. But this week, it's a middle-of-the-pack matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals, where their defense has definitely played well over the last month of the season. And there's games where Sam Darnold still has his lapses and turns over the football. So this week, like I said, not the greatest of matchups, even though he's playing great football and they're back home. I still believe in deeper leagues and 2 quarterback leagues, he's a good start. 17, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams. So this week, a pretty good matchup with the Saints. This could be a high-scoring game. Fast track, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. They've been the best combo in the league since they both returned from injury. And Matthew Stafford, he's been throwing his way into stats. I know this Ram team, they've lost 2 out of 3 ball games, but Matthew Stafford's still going out there. He's still putting up fantasy points. And this week in New Orleans, I believe he could go out there once again and be a viable option. 18, Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. So Caleb Williams last week finally had a big game after the previous month of the season. He didn't do much, but obviously that was a lot of passing and trying to get back into the game where they were down 24-10 was the Chicago Bears, and they forced overtime and lost to Caleb. No doubt about it. He went out there, put up numbers, 340, 2 passing touchdowns. DJ Moore had a good game. Keenan Allen had his best game as a Chicago Bear. Cole Kmet a solid ball game, but I don't believe it's going to repeat once again, even though this could be a similar game script like it was last week, where Detroit gets off to an early lead and they're chasing the whole game points is the Bears, and Caleb has to throw him back into the ball game. But like I said, Caleb Williams, he's only had 1 great game in the last 5 weeks, and I believe we got to see more out of him before he moves up the rankings. 19, Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks. So Geno Smith, when you got great weapons like DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's really emerged over the last month of the season, and Kenneth Walker out of the backfield, you're going to be amongst the league leaders like he is in passing yards. So this week in a matchup at the New York Jets, a team that drafted him obviously many seasons ago, I think Geno Smith could have a decent ball game, but he's another quarterback where it just seems like his ceiling has been capped more weeks than not. And like I said, with a full slate, these other quarterbacks have more upside and have had better seasons overall, I believe. And the 20th and final quarterback I'm ranking is Kirk Cousins of the Atlanta Falcons. I know he's coming off bye week, but this week I don't like the matchup that much versus the Los Angeles Chargers, where I think their defense could go out there, they could put up fantasy points versus Kirk Cousins. Cousins is still taking a lot of hits, and he's always been that gunslinging quarterback that's turned the football over as well. So this week versus the Chargers, I think he gave a decent ball game, but I don't know if the ceiling's going to be that high. I know the last few weeks, week 11, Joe Burrow had a monster game. I know last week Lamar obviously did his thing and had another big game as well, but Kirk Cousins isn't on the level, in my opinion, of those quarterbacks. But I still believe he could be a decent option. But like I said, what we've seen from him over the last few weeks, his numbers have definitely dropped off, and I don't really see him play this week. So at the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking for week 13 of the fantasy football season.